Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Tuesday and welcome back to our series, Pagan Problems. This week, because Imulk is rapidly approaching, we're going to be talking about what does it mean to purify, because purification is a very strong theme of Imulk. But let's do a little work with our definitions. To purify means to get rid of impurities. It means to rid of foreign or objectionable elements. It also means to free from moral or spiritual defilement. So let's break these down into three parts. First, with impurities. An impurity is something that doesn't belong where it's currently at. This could be poison in a medicine. It could be sugar in the salt shaker. It could be a dandelion in the rose garden. What makes it impure is that it is not where it's supposed to be. Another way to think of purity is that something that is pure is composed only of itself. Gold without the presence of other elements would be one example. Or silk that hasn't been blended with other materials. Snow that hasn't been stepped on. And when we're purifying ourselves, we're seeking to remove the things that don't belong within our systems or that don't belong in our possession. This could mean overcoming an addiction of some kind, be it to an illicit drug or a food that we're allergic to but really, really like, or even an addiction to drama and emotional upheaval. This can mean letting go of guilt. The purpose of guilt is to alert us that we've done something that violated our conscience, and it's really to prod us into confronting that reality and doing something about it. Now, once we have taken corrective action, no purpose is served by clinging to the guilt. So if we are harboring guilt from things long ago that we've already attended to, that's something that we would need to purify ourselves of. Sometimes purifying ourselves involves the recognition that who we were is no longer who we are, and it's not necessary to devote resources to or give energy to try to create this impression that we haven't changed, because we have changed, and that's fine. And oftentimes it's really very necessary, and it's a huge step forward in our lives to have changed. And so maintaining a false old persona, that's not going to help with purification, I'll put it that way. So the next part of the definition, foreign or objectionable elements. In this context, I want to make it clear, because it's important to understand that foreign isn't about a different nationality or different ethnicity. Think of it in the context of a foreign object. For example, if someone stuck a popsicle stick in your ear, the popsicle stick would be a foreign object, and it certainly would not enhance the aesthetics or the function of your ear, and it could potentially do damage. So that's what we're really talking about when we're talking about a foreign or objectionable element. Now, part of my Imulk preparations involves re-examining my ideas. Am I harboring ideas that are harmful to me in some way? Am I on the wrong track? Are my ideas logically consistent, or have I discovered a hole in my reasoning? This is part of identifying a foreign or objectionable element within my own mind. This process is an attempt to purify my spirituality, to let go of ideas and theories that just don't come up to scratch. I mean, this has happened to all of us. We might have had this idea, thought it was brilliant, and then the moment we start putting it to the test, or we try to put it in the larger picture and realize, oh, maybe that wasn't as brilliant as I thought. If we continue to cling to us, that's not going to do us any good. But if we let it go, that is purification. And of course, the hope is that my faith will be based on a solid foundation. It will be firmly rooted in reality as I continue to learn, explore, and hopefully grow. So, about the objectionable part of this definition, what makes something objectionable? I think this would refer to inherent incompatibility, or the attempt to fake reality or fool yourself, or deliberate lies to other people. It can be easy enough to dismiss contradictions. The usual excuse people use is, well, that's just how I feel about it, as if feelings are absolutely supreme and beyond contestation. But I've also heard, it doesn't matter, it's all just opinion anyway, or even occasionally I'll hear, but I like contradictions. Do you? Do you really? This is intellectual laziness, and that is the gentlest description I could come up with. It is beyond dispute that there are people who are content to leave these contradictions in place and never discover what's really what, and they prefer their status quo and their pet ideas over what has substance and what's real. But is that good enough for the rest of us? I understand that they think it's good enough for them, and that's for them to decide, but is that good enough for the rest of us? Now, I can only answer for myself, and my answer for me is that no, that's not okay. And I would encourage anyone watching this video to strive for better answers in life, whether these are spiritual answers or answers of another kind. And if we deliberately choose not to resolve contradictions. This is the intellectual equivalent of sitting in a mud puddle and declaring your intention of never leaving that mud puddle, and how awful people are to object to it or judge it, and how you found more happiness in mud than others have when washing it off. I mean, this is obviously a very childish way of thinking and a very childish way of acting. And perhaps as grown-ups, it's not becoming for us to behave that way. So to purify in this sense of the term, it will require having standards for ourselves and horrors. This means making judgments to bring ourselves into alignment with those standards. But to take this further, even deciding what standards we're going to adhere to, that will require having an overarching system of values. And those values will really determine if those standards are healthy or unhealthy. This isn't a small thing, and it isn't easy to embrace when we are living in a culture that rejects the very premise of values, standards, or a code of conduct. And this brings us to being free of moral or spiritual defilement. This subject is understandably touchy, and that is in direct consequence of many religions having intentionally abusing their power over believers. And this isn't something that's restricted to monotheistic faiths. There is a very long, sad, and tragic history of a betrayal of trust between religious organizations or religious leaders and believers. And this has led not only to individual crisis of faith, which is bad enough, which is serious enough, because that can really throw people for a loop and have a detrimental impact on their lives, but this has led to a broader and a more widespread rejection of religion and rejection even of spirituality. And this is so sad because it's such a huge failure. Our spiritual elders are meant to be a guide, not a ruler. So discussions on this broader topic, or even in general in spiritual matters, should reflect this understanding, especially when we walk into the minefield of what exactly constitutes moral purity or spiritual purity. And one last note before we do venture into this minefield. Is that individuals have the right and the responsibility to ultimately decide for themselves and see what those consequences of those decisions are, both the good and the ill consequences. And we shouldn't turn to other human beings or to large organizations into being substitutes for our own consciences. And we shouldn't seek to evade the task of listening to our consciences, learning from our experiences and our decisions, and training ourselves up in this way. It's up to us. We need to do this. So, to defile something is to make it unclean or impure, to corrupt it, to violate it, to desecrate, sully, and dishonor. Pretty strong term. And obviously this is not referring to the small stuff in life or to thoughtless mistakes or, teeny tiny little flaws of character. This denotes deliberate and intentional action. And the sole purpose of this action is to harm and to contaminate, to destroy something for the sake of destruction or at some twisted, disgusting means of gaining pleasure from that destruction. I mean, this is really, really sick stuff. So obviously, defilement of the moral or the spiritual kind, it isn't about minor character flaws or occasional bad behavior. It's not about having a mistaken idea in your head. Defilement is something very sinister. It's about knowingly committing evil acts. I would sincerely hope that anyone watching this video has no desire to go through life defiling people or places or objects or ideas. But it's also likely true that at some point in life we will encounter people who have no such scruples. And we may be dealing with long-term ramifications of the evil that has been done to us. So purifying ourselves from the effects of this evil is probably going to be a process, not an event. Now, it isn't fair that the hard work and the damage control and the restoration falls to us, but it is a reality. And we will stop getting in the way of our own healing process if we choose to accept that reality and then rise to the occasion for our own sake, for the sake of the people we love, and for the sake of life itself, including our spiritual life that we're trying to cultivate for ourselves. Now, the person who harmed us or the ideology that harmed us is real, and yet that person or idea does not represent all of humankind or all of philosophy or all of religion. And it will help us heal if we reject the idea that everyone will subject us to similar treatment. Relearning the process of taking individuals one at a time, examining ideas on their own merits, it will help create distance in our minds from our past trauma. Because as long as our past trauma controls us, who and what inflicted that trauma is effectively running our lives. It won't be easy, but learning to deny that power to those who have harmed us or to ideas that created devastation in our lives, that is vital to healing and to regaining our own agency. So we've got to learn the correct lesson from these awful experiences. And the correct lesson to be learned is seldom going to be the knee-jerk fight-or-flight response that we have to the immediate problem. It's one thing to be in emergency mode while we are in the midst of the actual emergency, but we can't live in that state, and emergencies don't go on for forever. Those who try to stay in this zone and thinking that they're somehow safer for it, they actually do damage to themselves. And worse, the damage that does to themselves, it creates damage in other aspects of their lives, and it can reinforce the belief that they need to continue to be in hyper alert emergency mode, to always be on guard, because they don't perceive any endpoint of their trauma. Everything just kind of reinforces this false belief that the trauma is ongoing. It is profoundly difficult to break this pattern, but it must be broken if we are to heal and to purify our spirit. Now, one last note about the process of purification, and it has to do with the scientific principle. Science does teach that nature abhors a vacuum. In other words, empty space tends to get filled up. The same principle holds true for ourselves. As we purify our spirits of either, the little things or the really big things, it's going to be necessary to fill the void that's been left behind. What we decide to fill ourselves with is the final part of this purification process. And hopefully this Amok season we'll be choosing good things and we'll be reaping the rewards of that moving forward this year. So, a lot to unpack there. I know I threw the whole kitchen sink at you in this video. Thank you for listening all the way through. If you'd like to carry on this conversation, because I did broadly wander into some deeper waters, but if you'd like to explore those further, please come see me at Blackbird's Brew. There's a link to join in the description box below. And in the meantime, please subscribe to this video, leave a comment, like it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.